What's up, everybody? Nick Powell's publisher of 1851franchise.com here with another episode of Meet the Supplier. So these are the exciting ones, Tom, because I get to learn about your business and the problems that you solve for franchise companies. So before we get into the business side, take me through your franchise journey. How did you accidentally fall into franchising?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that you asked this question. And first off, want to thank you for having me on the show today. And I think I like that you describe it as accidentally falling into franchising. I think most of us in the franchise world end up here not by intent. Sometimes it just kind of happened that way. And mine is very similar. It was really my first job right out of undergrad was with a management consulting company. My goal was I wanted to get into management consulting. I was a business management major, wanted to work for a consulting group, and that was my focus. And it just happened to be that the first opportunity that I had that seemed interesting to me was at a franchise consulting company, helping companies franchise their business. And so fell in love with the industry and franchising and just the power of franchising. And so between that and I had read the E-Myth in undergrad by Michael Gerber, and he had talked about franchising and replications and systems. And at the time, my dad owned a little used car lot, and I was working there over the summers and helping him out. And it just really resonated to me. So it was kind of these confluence of a couple different points talking about franchising, and it fell in love and have stayed here pretty much ever since.
Okay, and so you stay at this consulting firm, and then you quit and you start your own. Is that the pathway?
No. From there, I ended up getting hired by a client of mine. It was a client that I had worked with for a couple of years, and I always say in consulting is, you're doing a good job when your clients are offering you full-time employment. That tends to be a good indication. And so had several of those over the years. Nothing that really seemed was really of interest to me, and then had an opportunity to go work for a client for a few years in of all things, the commercial paving and commercial roofing space, and based out of Schaumburg, Illinois there, and ended up working there for a few years, and then got back into consulting, and had a partner for a few years, and just long story short, just, really a different vision for where we wanted to take the company and what we were interested in doing. And that's when I started Big Sky here, coming up on 8.5, going on 9 years ago.
So I think this is important for franchisors too. So you'll see how this point works out. Long time ago, I wrote a column for 1851, and the title was "Catch the Entrepreneur Before They Catch You." And oftentimes, and I can hear it in your career, you consultancy, franchisor, business, consultancy. And so all this time, you've been running your own business for 9 years. All of this time, there's an entrepreneur staring in front of all of these human beings that have employed you. And so what happens, in my opinion, is leaders don't recognize the entrepreneur. And if you do, and you say, how can I take this fearlessness, this ability to cut through brick walls, this craziness, how do I take this craziness and put it to work for the company that I own? And oftentimes this term equity is the piece that ends up being the thing that ends up missing in the puzzle, or in opinions or view at the top of not listening to the voices around you. And so what I hear here is you had all these human beings that had the opportunity to catch the entrepreneur before you caught them. And so when I think about this scenario, same with mine, for me, I was raising my hand and saying, I want to give you everything that I have. I love it here. But in exchange, I want to be a partner. And when I'm told that unless I have the same last name, then I'm not going to have any shot at this, at that point, it's triggering me to say, I could have this career or I could have this life. And so I when you're talking, it makes me think through that, because it's the same for a franchise buyer too, or a franchisor. Oftentimes there's this almost invisible quality of human beings called the entrepreneur inside And if a business grabs it, then their business could have a tremendous valuation because you just took a ingredient that is so powerful. When I say all that stuff, how does that resonate with you, and how does that relate to you?
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and it makes me think about the franchise data that shows consistently. Franchise Ventures always publishes a bunch of data and interviews and researches. Ask budding entrepreneurs, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Why are you doing this? What's driving you? And pretty consistently, about 9 out of 10 respondents will say, I want to be my own boss. And that is to me, the franchise catchphrase for decades has been be your own boss. You're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And that's a long time catchphrase in franchising. And a lot of this data validates it. And I think, in my opinion, from what you're saying, is as a leader of an organization, if you're trying to retain top talent, I think what it's saying is a lot of your leaders have some very version of an entrepreneur in them. Some of them likely will become entrepreneurs if they haven't been already. And so to me, when I think of it, I blend those worlds together and start saying, well, how can I help create a work environment where I help my key staff and leaders? How can I help them feel like they are their own boss here? What can I do for that? And I think of two big items. The first being control of time. People want to have the control of their time. So how can there be some type of autonomy or some type of control on their time, whatever that might look like? And maybe they want to come in and start their day at 10 o'clock in the morning because it's the only time they get to see their kids for the week is in the morning, and they're going to stay and work until 8 o'clock at night. I don't know. And then number two would be some tie-in financially to the gain of the organization. So not just certainly salespeople, sales compensation generally is tied into in some capacity in that regard, but oftentimes the people in the management or operational staff, sometimes it's not quite as clearly tied into the gain of the organization. So figuring out some compensation structure to have them get as close to that entrepreneurship as possible. And then I guess I'd add one other in there, the third, and it's talked about a lot in it is this idea of intrapreneurship. So allowing for that person who maybe has those ideas that wants to go and create or design or try things and provide an environment within your organization for them to fail or succeed. Maybe they succeed, but a safe place where they can try new stuff and new ideas and new products or services or offerings within your organization that might be complementary or new to what you're doing. So it's not maybe a bet the farm strategy, but it helps satisfy that I guess, as they say, satisfy that itch to go out and do something on their own. So it's that creative end of it as well. So it's time, it's the ability to earn that where the earning is correlated or tied with performance of the organization. And then the third piece would be that creative outlet or the opportunity to create or do something new. I think if by doing that as a leader of an organization, you can provide a framework for your employees and staff to, especially those key folks that you'd like to stick around to stay longer than they maybe would have otherwise.
Yeah, and when you can tap into that energy, then it ultimately impacts your business tremendously. And so for you, again, like I look backwards at some of the misses and say, what was the opportunity? And so for all these people that you worked with or worked for, if they would have just seen like this guy is capable of building a business that can operate successfully for 9 years, man, that attached to my business is great. I think the hardest discussion, I actually gave this advice to someone last week. The hardest discussion when it comes to the equity piece is, do people have the mental stability to go down just as much as they like to celebrate going up? And when you have equity, that means if it's a shitty day, you might have to put more fuel into the engine. And that's part of like where it goes. And sometimes when you say, are you willing to put that in? And sometimes that's not cash, maybe it's a little bit more sweat. But when you say, are you willing to put it in if we have a bad year? And they're like, well, no. Then you say that's different. That's not the same. I've also thought about entrepreneurship. I've always said that franchising is entrepreneurial, not an entrepreneur, because when you're buying into a system, it is a complete safety net. And if you really use that safety net to your advantage, then all the formatting is done, and you're able to take your capital and your time and your hustle, and you're able to turn it into something greater on top of a business that's already created in exchange for the royalty, which is, in my opinion, royalty is probably the wrong term. It should be like the operational cost of doing business. But anyway, so it's just interesting because I think about your story as it relates to the industry that we're both in. And I would imagine there's a lot of people, all these franchise buyers that are sitting out in the world saying, is it my time? Am I an entrepreneur? Am I entrepreneurial? Is my company taking care of me? Are they considerate of what my needs are? And has anyone even asked me what's important to me?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a point well taken, and it's interesting your perspective on entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial as a franchisee. I've always viewed, I'd say my opinion very slightly than yours on franchising. I've always viewed franchisees as entrepreneurs. They're just they're executing on a system, but making it fit. They're able to choose the business that they would like versus being, maybe oftentimes entrepreneurs become technicians. They are great at a craft. And so they take that craft and create a business around that craft. I don't think that it changes them being an entrepreneur in any way, shape, or form in that regard. But to tie that back to your the conversation on, what do you do? I just keep thinking about what you said about these folks that come through that are entrepreneurial, that you have this great opportunity to expand with and grow with. And I've had misses in my own company where I've had great leaders that it makes sense to tie them in some way, shape, or form, and just not able to either figure it out, or the business was not ready for a partner, where it just was, the business was either too new or not in a position to take on some type of a role of a partner. So there are a lot of dynamics in there. And I think it's definitely a quagmire for a leader to know, when is that right time? Is it now? Is it like being ready to have kids? You're never really ready. So do you just say, let's go, and hope that there's a little grace along the way?
Well, that's where, like, when I'm categorizing franchisees, I break it into basically an operator mindset and a income replacement mindset. So they're both franchisees, but one is going to build wealth and one is going to replace their salary. And it's a two different mindset thing. So if we take the word entrepreneur and we break it into multiple categories, like there's a reason they call it founder syndrome, because the founder is nuts. Like they are crazier, their vision is bigger, their shit doesn't smell like it's just it's a different type of crazy. Now at the end of this, and if you look at what is the end goal of all this, it's either it's wealth building, or it's building something for your family, or it's building legacy. And we all end up, like, the reality is all of us end up in the exact same spot. We're dead. So the pathway to get there is going to be different. And so when you make a decision, because majority of human beings need a job to live life, at what point are you? And if we take all four of those, are you a crazy founder? Are you entrepreneurial? Are you a job replacement franchisee? Are you a wealth builder? And so if you take those categories, or you a career person and you're comfortable, working 9 to 5, getting paid a salary, not having to have the pains of everything else behind you, like, there are different pathways to get to where the same end that we're all going to go to.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way you break it down, and I agree in what I've seen in franchising, and even in franchisors. We help companies. We work primarily with successful entrepreneurs that want to franchise their business. And even with those clients, I find how you broke down those categories, you see while we do work with many founders, there are lots of folks who started originally as income replacement just for sake of they needed something to generate some revenue, and all of a sudden, here it comes and it's working, and now they've got this thriving business and saying, "Okay, I understand what I've done," and often. The founders that we work with in helping them franchise will start looking at this to say, part of the reason why they do it, at least the clients we work with, they say, I want to be able to provide to someone that opportunity that I had that changed my life. And so if my system that I've figured out can help someone else replace their income, create a steady form of employment, or be an operator of a system, right? These categories you're describing, or maybe become a multi-unit operator and really build some substantial wealth by owning many of these. That's a big driver for them to be able to share that with someone else and help them change their life the way that the founders was changed.
Let's switch angles, because you just brought up the helping people franchise their business. For you get brand X coming to the table, and I'm gonna try framing this the right way because I want your opinion on it. Brand X comes to the table. They're like, I want to franchise my business. I had a customer that told me, boy, you should franchise. And you look at their business, and there's no way it's going to drive profitability for a franchisee if they happen to sell a franchise. I think the number was like 87% of first-time franchisors don't sell a unit in the first 2 years. And so if their expectations are out of line, they're like, I'm going to have 50 of these in year one. When you get one of these candidates on the franchisor side, how do you manage that? And I would imagine it's the same as selling a franchise. Like, the wrong person comes to the table, but they're waving the right check. How do you say no to them? How do you navigate that with a franchise brand or a brand that wants a franchise that probably shouldn't?
Yeah, that's a great question. If it's unclear or it's a little murky in the beginning, that's generally a pretty noticeable flag to say, well, let's pause and review. It's also part of the reason why we've really sought to differentiate in our market. We offer a program called our Franchise Blueprint, which is really a feasibility study. And the idea is it's a first step to do a comprehensive analysis, not just, quote, what they view as a salesperson, kind of giving them a review or an assessment, even though we do take them through a consultative approach to this to assess viability of franchising. In fact, we had a gentleman we spoke with a few days ago that was not happy that we had told him we think he should wait to franchise, and sent us an email telling us as such. But from our assessment, his business was not ready. And the franchise blueprint process is more of it's a deep dive analysis to help someone understand, to really help uncover that. And the big push that we like to look for is exactly what you're referencing there, Nick, which is it has to work for a franchisee. If it's not viable for a franchisee, then why are we doing this? I mean, the whole point is to provide a pathway for that franchisee to find some success, however they're defining it, through your franchise system. And if it can't work for the franchisee, then what's the point? I mean, it's setting that franchisor up for a whole lot of problems down the line. Yeah.
Not to put down competitors, but is it a mental challenge to say you're not ready, knowing that there are so many other consultants that will say, oh yeah, of course you are, and I'll take your money?
Sure. Yeah, of course. And, I would say our approach is, our number one value is win-win relationships. And so we truly like to find the win-win, certainly for the client and for us. And if we're relational in nature, so if we're going into this initial engagement under the premise that, well, we're just taking your money, that's a pretty poor way to begin a relationship with any person. We're just going to use you. I don't, that's not why I want to do that. So we're not as high volume as other folks in our space. And part of the reason is just, we're okay saying no. That's okay. Or we're okay with a client that decides to hire a competitor. And there are plenty of quality competitors out there for them to engage with. Certainly, it's best to find the best fit for them as they go through it. But for the brand that's not franchisable, I mean, and when we're looking at it today. What does that look like today? That doesn't mean it's not going to change 6 months from now or a year from now or 2 years from now, where they've modified their business. I've had that happen. I've been doing this long enough. I get calls from people I met with 6 years ago, 10 years ago, that call me and say, "Hey, Tom, we met X number of years ago. I wasn't ready then. We cleaned up our business. We did this. We implemented these things, and now we're ready, or we're in a much better spot. Let's talk."
Yeah, I mean I think that's the right approach. Do you? And this is a simple but loaded question. It's challenging to create point of differentiation between what you do and what others do. I mean, obviously, like the fundamentals of franchising business, getting your operations manual set and getting your FDD updated or live, then building out what is your go-to-market strategy, and do you have the fundamentals of a franchise website, etc. But does it come down to personality match, or are there other things that Big Sky can do to say this is how we're different?
I think that's a great question. I would say some of it is personality. Yes. I think a client project we worked on recently, it's actually been about a year since we worked with the client, and I ran into him at a trade show, and he was just singing our praises, which was unsolicited. He just was very happy. And he said, "Tom, when I hired you all about a year or so ago, I interviewed just about every competitor you could ever think of. I looked at so many companies that do what you do." And he said, the reason why I ended up working with you is because it wasn't what was in the contract. Because it's kind of what you're saying there, Nick. People are going to put together some documents. Well, if that's what he was saying to me, is I didn't just want documents. I wanted a guide. I wanted someone to help me through this that I knew was going to follow through and not just take my money and essentially kind of take the money, get the documents, and move on with the project. And he said, the thing for me that after meeting with you, talking to some of your previous customers and others, is that you're going to give me all the stuff that is, quote, not included in the contracts, all the stuff that no one talks about, but is going to matter when it matters. And you don't know it until you need it. And he said, you followed through and delivered on literally everything you could have possibly delivered on, and then some that I didn't even know I needed. And I'm so happy with my choice. So I guess to summarize that, I always look at it, and for clients usually end up working with us because they're looking for that personal touch, the hand holding. And in today's world, I mean, I'm not ashamed to say I'm an owner operator. I love my business. I love my craft and what I do. And I work closely with many of our clients still. And so that has been a point of difference, that clients can see that the sincerity in that approach. And for the clients where that matters, we're a great fit. And if it doesn't matter, if it's more of transactional in nature, we're not going to be a great fit. We can do documents in that way and so on, but they're probably going to find another company out there that'll do it either in a different way or fulfill some other promise that they're looking for.
Yeah, I love the way they put that. At the end of the day, like there's the contractual terms, and then there's the intangibles. And my belief is the intangibles are what help define point of differentiation. And look, there's plenty of business out there. There are a lot of businesses that want to franchise their business, and a lot of businesses that dream of growing and exiting. And sometimes identifying those intangibles is important. Now, I will say this, and this is for my segment too of what we do. The amount of calls that I get of, boy, I was burned, or I didn't get what I expected. I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way to do due diligence in this industry, because there are plenty of snakes who will take people's money and make you feel like, oh yeah, we're going to grow you to 1 billion locations tomorrow. But and that's probably the hardest thing about the franchise supplier network is how do you differentiate who is legit and who is just there for money? And it's tough. And that's obviously why we do conversations like this. And I'm grateful that you were willing to do this with me today.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And, one of the things that I always look at as a testament to the work you do and what your company does and what we try to do, I just think of the content we try to create and produce. For much of what we're producing, there's no return on the amount of money and time that's spent on it. But I know there's value add in the podcasts we produce for 4.5 years of hundreds of episodes and webinars and so on. And it's hard to quantify that. There's not necessarily a return, but we're trying to provide value to our community to help educate them so that they can put their best foot forward as they look to expand.
Well, I said we all end up in the same dot. So if the value is just connecting with humans and talking about things of common interest, then there's value in that. So, Tom, I'm grateful for you doing this. For Tom, I'm Nick. This is another episode of Meet the Supplier.